Welcome to another episode of the Modern Women's Podcast with ATP, with your hosts Elizma and Nicole. And today we are very privileged to have a very special guest on our show, who is a dear friend of mine and also a colleague, Danielle Valoras, all from the USA. So to give you guys a bit of a background of Danielle, she is a certified physician assistant. She's a founder and clinician of NavWell, which is an integrative health practice. And she's also the originator of the Breast Implant Health Summit, which was done this year, not so long ago. For anyone who suspect they may have breast implant illness, I highly recommend that you go and look at the summit. We'll give you the details on the podcast as well on where you can get it. But if you put in
www.breastimplанthealthsummit.com.
Okay, there you go. And we'll do that again at the end as well. That was an amazing summit and definitely worth the money and the time to really get yourself educated on breast implant illness. So Danielle, she brings over 20 years experience in medical research and education to her clients, and she specializes in psychoneuroendocrine immunology, which is kind of like looking at the link between the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system in relation to physical health. So she she kind of integrates Western medicine, functional medicine, trauma response, and also clinical bodywork therapies, and treats autoimmune issues, chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, and implantable device-related illnesses such as breast implant illness. And I love this quote that you have on the Breast Implant Illness Summit, Danielle. So I want to really put this quote out there. The trauma these women have gone through is unconscionable. The lack of knowledge around devices such as breast implants is amoral. Bringing this group of experts together is a necessary step for the health, education, and advocacy of women's health. And I just love that quote because, to be quite honest, I mean, this has been ignored for a very long time in mainstream medicine. Now it's kind of like seen as a legitimate disorder, and it's receiving a lot more attention, but been a long road and a long journey for a lot of women. And I guess, you know, for you, Danielle, it's also a bit of a personal experience as well. So do you want to share a little bit about how close this is to home for you?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for letting me speak on behalf of everyone with breast implant illness in this moment. For me, in 2015, I decided to get breast implants at the age of 48. You know, I had lost 40 pounds and finally had a six pack, and I thought, let's go for the gold. And it was approved. It was at least safe in my world, in which I studied and I researched and I looked on the FDA website and I did all the things. And 3 months into having the implants, I subtly fell ill, and my lymphatics or my ankles started to swell, my elbows and my wrists started to swell, my mouth started to swell, and then I had exertional migraines and all these little, at the time it felt little, but they were like nuances, and then they just got bigger and bigger. And I ended up in the ER with they thought I had a brain aneurysm, and it was just exertional. There was an exertional migraine, basically. And no one could troubleshoot why. And I'm a PA, not that means like the world of goodness, but I have some medical background. So I thought when a client comes to me or comes to the ER, we're always told if they have the worst headache of their life, you know, you think aneurysm, you think get them to the ER, they've got to do some things. And so this was the worst headache I've had in my life. And I ended up in the ER and it was nothing. Like, what was that? And I knew I wasn't like psychosomatic and that kind of thing. So I didn't really know what to do with all that. And then the symptoms of fatigue and drain and it was so insidious that everyone just said, oh, it's menopause. This is how you're supposed to feel at 48. Or, you know, you're almost 50. This is how life is going to be. And I mean, it was so tiring and devastating, and just it didn't match in my head. And I had been studying functional medicine for some time, and the big thing that they do is, or they teach, is look at the history, look at the events. And when I got the breast implants, it was literally night and day. Like for me, 3 months after, things started to happen, because I was like in the best shape of my life and the best energy. I was like maybe more hyperactive than depressive or anxiety, but I had depression and anxiety was coming and all of this stuff that just wasn't like me. So I just started to look into what would maybe be the root cause. And for a long time, I thought it was the physicalness of having the new weight on the thoracic outlet and, maybe blocking the brain lymphatics and things like that. And it took a year. Actually, it took a year and a half before we decided to remove the implants. And then as soon as I removed the implants, there was about 80% relief.
Wow.
And that was it was such an eye opener, because I'm a little rambling here, but in that year and a half, I think I saw about 30 practitioners just trying to find help or relief, or if this was menopause, on some level, who wants to live? You know, 48 should be the beginning. I mean, it is the beginning now. I'm almost 54 in a couple of weeks. And that was not menopause.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be in the moment of how I was when I had the implants. And it was just this kind of chaos in my head. So when they got removed, it was like one, I could breathe better. Two, is a little more clarity. And even then, like every 3 to 4 months, you would have some different flares. But the good news is, like, I think 3 days into my explant, I met this lady named Elizma Lambert. She was given some organic acid lecture for Great Plains in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I knew I had to look at my biochemistry. And that rocked my world. And that actually set me on the mission. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but yeah, I definitely do breast implant illness.
You did. I remember, when I met you for the first time, you still had the drainage pipes in, I believe.
I was 3 days out.
Yeah,
wow,
that's right. And
that's how good I was feeling.
Yeah.
Right? I was able to sit through, I don't mean this in a negative way, but your lecture, and it was awesome. And it shifted my world. It shifted my practice. And then I realized, wow, this is biochemical. And I didn't think it was. I thought it was just a physical nerve impingement, something. And, if anyone had come to me pre that experience, I would not have believed in breast implant illness.
No,
but I do.
You raised a very good point, right? Because when you had your implants removed, they didn't rupture, correct?
No, they were like just over a year and a half old. They were intact, totally clean. There's something called gel bleed, and it's actually in the manufacturer's. They call it safety and effectiveness. It's the way they submit for their IDE to get approval, and they talk about gel bleed, and they talk about silicone alone, and they talk about how it's an earth biocompatible material. And so maybe 20 years ago, that's what we knew, right?
Yeah.
And now we know that in order to make the gel, they bind that to platinum to make the consistency of the implants that they need. This is, and if I may, this is just of the shell. We're not even talking about the contents like saline or silicone. And so if that breaches, that membrane. And if it's not even a phospholipid bilayer, right?
Yeah,
Like a regular cell membrane, it's just like a maybe a one layer. And so that is a phospholipic. It loves fat. And if you put it in breast tissue.
Well, yeah, exactly, right? I mean, that's what breast tissue pretty much is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And mammary glands and lymphatics. And what do you have here for innervation? Like you talk about hormones, you talk about detox, it's your lymphatic system. Where's your major lymphatic drainage point?
Yeah.
It's your left side. Here it is. And what are you putting right underneath your pec major? Absolutely. I don't know if that's allowed to do. But you're right under here, and it's right there where the thoracic outlet is.
Yeah.
So sure, physically it's going to do whatever it's going to do, but biochemically,
absolutely.
Come on.
And also, I think you kind of like, there has been some really good research done, I believe, by Dr. Dykman. You sent me a study on that, which was looking at platinum and silicon individually and then in combination, and how there's differing toxicity levels there. Because this is kind of like what a lot of labs will do, is they'll look at them individually and they'll say, oh yeah, that's not so bad, it's not so harmful. But there's very little research often done on combinations of substances, correct?
Yeah, and Deachcombe, Capel, Fleury, I'm going to say his name wrong, Perugian.
Yeah, I could not pronounce his name either.
But they all, so first, there's many molecule sizes of silicone. And the smaller the size, the more detrimental it is. And what passes through, we'll call it diffusion or gel bleed. Your body is amazing. It will form a capsule to protect you. Mm. In essence, whether it's silicone, bacteria, fungus, why your body's protecting you, that for me, that's not this conversation, but your body's going to do what it needs to do to protect you. It's amazing. So it builds this capsule. For some of us, we can't build the capsule so fast for whatever reason, whether we have previous autoimmunity, whether we have leaky gut, whether we're dealing with other things, like you can only use your resources to X degree, right? Yeah. And what we're finding is that with the more robust chemicals in the breast implants or in the breast implant shell, different people will mount a different capsular contracture, and that's Baker's 1 to Baker's 4. So if you look at the capsule as a catcher's mitt, you've got Baker's 1 being thin and Baker's 4 being like, you got two players behind that capture. So the longer you have the implants, the thicker your capsule may be. But the women who, this is a little hypothetical because we're just getting the research in and trying to do all the things. But the thinner the capsule, the less the catcher's mitt you have. Mm. So if you can't catch it, it goes past the capsule into the breast tissue, into the lymphatics, and there you go. And that's where silicone molecules come into play. The platinum, if you bind that to make the shell more competent to not let things through, it causes a type of oxidative stress on the body. Mm. And then from that word, I think you can take it from there, from ROS to what is your body, what is your epigenetics going to do with that?
Absolutely. That's probably why some women will get breast implant illness and others don't when they have implants.
Yeah, and this might be a little light, but I look at it as like when I was in college, I could go out every night or every other night, certainly Friday, Saturday, and then rest on Sunday and be ready for classes on Monday, assuming I went to classes on Monday, right? Yeah. But as I get older, maybe Friday, maybe Saturday, but I couldn't do both. And then as I got older, maybe neither. Or maybe I could go
Yeah.
out, but not late. I couldn't definitely drink and do the same things. Like, what is your body able to do?
Yeah.
How fast can you clean up after the party?
Yeah.
And we talk about environmental toxins, and here we've implanted them.
Mm.
So good for the people who can tolerate them. And, but some of us can't. And if you've had autoimmune issues or asthma, you're already at a deficit.
Because, I mean, we've been talking about just the capsules, and we haven't talked about what's inside the capsules yet, but we know that when we look at what's inside the capsules, there's like 40 plus chemicals, toxic chemicals and heavy metals in these implants, isn't there?
And oh, for sure. Like, and I can send you the different ones that Dr. Blythe has studied. He's in Canada. I think he might be retired now, but he spent his life looking at, what are the differences of the chemicals in each manufacturer or each generation and what that causes. And I think he's seeing that the gels or the gummy bears or that kind of consistency, which makes it more human to touch, is also the most detrimental to a person if they have that. I don't want to blame it necessarily on epigenetics because it is a foreign body or a foreign object in the body. And that's a big deal, whether it's a hip, whether it's a dental implant, whether it's a breast implant, whether it's, there's so many life-saving devices like pacemakers and internal cardiac defibrillators and things like that we need. That's a choice to be like, do I want an autoimmune-like disease or do I want to live?
Yeah.
I want to live. Do I want breast implants?
Yeah.
Or so there are, I would say that a foreign object causes a shift in everybody's body from a physical, structural, functional level to a biochemical, physical level or physiology level. And we haven't looked at that.
Absolutely, because even scar tissue formation, right? That's a big thing, right? Because that's a physical response of the body to a breast implant.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm talking so much, but like that. So just on if you cut yourself level, right? Or you need stitches level, like there's a fluidity of the body that is just physiologic that you have. And ideally your body works kind of like this, right? You have a scar, maybe you work like this. And some of those scars from surgery go all the way down to the gallbladder, to the liver, to the C-section, to the whatever. And so depending on the person and how you adapted to the scar or the trauma of it, and this is where the psychoneuroimmunology comes in, like we react differently to it. And you hold a tension. The tension could be the woo side of the tension, or it could be just the physical side of the tension, right? Like where you just cut. So how you hold that tension also translate to how you hold your posture. How you hold your posture. Let's just focus on the neck. If I'm looking at my cell phone, this is my posture, right? If I'm not looking at, maybe I'm like this, and then even this shoulder might be a little rounded. So it affects, like, there's not one thing. You're a system. And, I don't mean to, like, you taught me that, like, well, when you look at the whole body as a whole, I mean, literally as a whole, you can't take away the physical and the physiological. Yeah. And in breast implants, for function, you're cutting underneath the breast. There's a great Kira Wilms did a part of the summit and she did acupuncture and Chinese medicine talk with also compassionate inquiry about what the breast symbolizes in a woman, the nourishment. And if you think about where we cut to put the breast implants in, whether it's above the muscle or under the muscle, like that's a big deal. And that's also a big deal where lymphatics are. And if you're going under the muscle, now you're in a different plane and you're right there where the nerve, like the what do you call it when the nerve fibers like thicker?
Axons? No?
Well, so if you cut the axons, if you cut those versus the dendrites, then you have numbness, right?
Yeah.
But this is a whole area, like.
Well, we've got that whole axillary plexus right here under the arm.
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah. Like where all these nerves and things come together and connect, very close.
And I don't know if you guys covered much on the vagus nerve, but that's right here, right? And so when you put weight here, you affect a whole bunch of everything. If you can't drain your lymphatics, and there's more than two ways, but if we can humor me and talk about two ways.
Absolutely.
There's the physical way that you can block the vagus nerve, right? Just physical tension. And then there's also a biochemical way you can block it. And when you do that, you interrupt, for some maybe more than others, and maybe some they don't feel it at all, you interrupt the parasympathetic involvement, and that's rest and digest.
Yeah.
And if you're not able to get there, if you're not able to sleep at night, if you're not able to heal or recoup or regenerate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a good point too, because, and I'd like to talk about what sort of symptoms can present, because they can be many and varied, and even things like when you're it's affecting your vagus nerve, then we see a lot of anxiety and things like that, and that can be so far from what you would think is connected to breast implants. So what are the sort of symptoms that you see? Because there must be so many different ones that, it'd be very hard to sort of pull it back to those implants.
This is so exciting. You can't, if you're the patient, if you're me and you're a year out from your implants and your left arm goes numb, you start having panic attacks or anxiety attacks, and you now wake up to the alarm clock where I'm a little hyperactive and I just wake up when it's time to wake up, and you just go and it's fun. But you don't want to get out of bed anymore. What is that? Am I going to think that? Why would I think that's my breast implants?
Yeah.
And it's so slow. It's so insidious. And on some levels, it's subtle, right?
Yeah.
And when someone who you trust tells you it's menopause, or you're 48, you're perimenopause. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's true, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, huh.
Yeah.
I think that's when that. Sorry, Danielle.
No, please.
That sort of instinct or that inherent sort of knowing kicks in, and everyone's, you might be seeing all these professionals and saying, no, it's not related to implants. But if the voice keeps coming back up and saying, I was fine before this, and it's just there's something telling me that that's connected, I think you need to really follow through with that, even if you do have professionals telling you that it's not related. So I think your body will tell you, it really knows, and you've just got to really start to listen to it, because it'll always tell you.
It's interesting though, because when I was in it, thank goodness I could go to practitioners that knew me before, because I wasn't the same person after.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and when you had, so obviously with your experience, Danielle, you had a lot of practitioners at that point in time not connecting the dots between the implants and your symptoms. Do you think that has changed in any way in the last 5 years or more? Do you feel like there's been a shift?
For some, and I would say in the functional medicine naturopath world, yes. They're now, that's what the summit was for. Like at the end of the day, if in all the stuff we did, people now ask if you have an implantable device, breast implants, not just did you ever have surgery? Do you have staples? Do you have anything? And that gets checked off. And if you aren't getting better, or you can't heal the gut, or you can't keep the chiropractic adjustment, or I'm hoping practitioners will think the next thing. Yeah. It's not changing fast enough, but it's been 3 years for me. And, if there's any omission, that's mine, is to make sure there's places for all of us to go.
Yeah. And I think you were spot on with the timeline stuff. I mean, again, it's a little bit hard because your symptoms developed about 3 months post-implant. So it was a short period of time. But then there's some women where it could be a year, 2 years, 3 years, right?
Or 10.
10, yeah.
Up to 10. Or 10.
So
yeah, and when they get the change out, right? Like when it's, they're not lifetime devices. The manufacturer suggestion is after your first 5 years, get an MRI, and then 2 years after, get another MRI. Which for us in the U.S., that's out of your pocket, which is like $5,000-$6,000.
Yeah, that's huge. And I mean, I don't know any woman who with breast implants who get regular MRIs. And I was a bit shocked because I even, I found a paper where it showed that the labels, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it showed that the labels on saline implants shows that it has to be stored below 25 degrees Celsius and it has a use-by date of 18 months. Yet it gets put into a female body with a body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit for longer than 18 months,
and
right?
told to change them every 5 to 10 years. So that's a little scary.
Like 6 to 7, actually, but yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, they didn't. Yeah. I got to hold back on that one, Elizma.
I know. It's just, you start reading this stuff and like you commented, it's in the breast tissue. These chemicals are very lipid soluble, or they love fats. I mean, there was this one study. It was called the release of low molecular weight silicons and platinum from silicon breast implants that was published in Analytical Chemistry, I believe. And it showed they took a 250-gram intact implant at 37 degrees Celsius, and it showed that silicon leaked at a rate of about 10 milligrams per day and platinum leaking at a rate of 20 to 25 micrograms per day. And I just thought that was, astonishing, that this is kind of like what happens in women's bodies.
And that's the average.
Yeah.
That happens in women's bodies, right? So we can go over different scenarios, the bodybuilders, the active person, the person who lives in Arizona, where maybe their body temperatures are higher or they're doing more movement and friction and things. And what I find mind-boggling is that now, in the 60s, they had the implants. And those were generated. Now, back in the early day, they were class 2 medical devices in the U.S. So they didn't need so much regulation. One dog by the name of Esmeralda, you can Google her, and I'm pretty sure you'll see her with and without implants. She lasted 2 weeks before she gnawed the sutures out to get the implants out.
Oh, wow.
But somehow they were able to say, no, that's okay. The dog's going to bite the wound. I mean, dogs lick their wounds all the time, right? But they're safe enough to go. So I wish I was joking, but everything was built from there to now. Wow. Then, was it in the 60s where they had the silicone leaks and the ruptures and the moratorium, the lawsuits started to happen with Dow Corning and all of that. But what's brilliant is they only focused on the leak and the rupture. They didn't talk about the gel bleed. So I don't know if it's brilliantly diabolical or if they were only looking there, right? But the advertisements, the way they went, so they said, okay, let's build these things so they don't leak or rupture. But yet in their dissertation to the FDA, they talk about something called gel bleed. And they talk about that silicone by itself and that platinum by itself in these quantities are just perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't talk about how they're bonded, or like, I'm not a physical chemist, but when I looked into all of this, like, that's an oxidative stress like no other. And if you look at platinum toxicity, it's the same symptoms we have. If you look at silicone toxicity, it's the same symptoms we have. You put them together. We haven't looked at that in a research way, so I can't tell you what that conforms to, but it, you know, if that's what I experience, it's not very nice.
Yeah. Well, I think the first paper on gel bleeds and even mold in implants was published in 1978, which is a long time ago. And, you know, yet it doesn't seem to have been a lot of attention given to that fact that it was already recognized in 1978.
I mean, when I'm sorry, it's very emotional, actually. Like, I can't believe it's actually longer than that. We've been fighting this, well, not me personally, but like, we've been talking to this for so long. And I think there's a lot of women out there, including myself, that want the innovation. You know, we want the technology to have, you know, whatever we want to have, basically. But we want it safe.
Yeah.
And if we can't have it safe, at least fully inform us, right? So let us make the choice. But we're not able. We don't have the knowledge yet to do that. So when you say since 1978, it really throws me. And we talk about mold, like, you know, I see a lot of mold, mildew in the saline implants more than I do the silicone. I think the silicone may have more preservative structure in there that is anti that, but maybe more. I think when you have a cohesive gel, I think you get sick sooner than a saline implant would. But what I would, what hasn't changed, in my opinion, since 1978 is the mold and the mildew.
Yeah.
And I don't see how they can still argue around that unless they just think it doesn't affect us, because when you take out an implant, there's sometimes those implants, and I'll be glad to share some pictures with you, is sometimes they're supposed to be clear white crystal, then they're yellow, and then they go all the way up to sometimes really black, and sometimes in that's yellow with flakes in it and different things, and we don't know what those particles are. It's not like the implant companies will tell you what they are. In the US, you're supposed to send them back for evaluation. And sometimes you don't ever get the evaluation back. And if we're going to do that out of pocket, again, it's another like $5,000-$6,000, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's a good point as well, because a lot of women do think that saline may be better than silicone.
Safer.
Right? Yeah, safer. So there's not really such a thing as a safe implant.
Everything's a foreign object, number one. And number two is the shell is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? There are different shells that have different textures on the outside, which is a different discussion, because you can have smooth and then you can have a textured like a sandpaper. And that was supposed to keep things in place and maybe minimize capsular contracture. for some, it causes a lymphoma called BIALCL, which is breast implant.
That's been getting a lot of attention. Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of black box warning. I think Australia might have taken it off the market. I know Europe did.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, you know, in preparing for this conversation, I was talking to a lot of the women from Australia who are affected with breast implant illness. It's almost larger than the U.S.
Wow.
You know, or it's about equal. Like there's, and what's I think harder for them, and I would love to post some of the groups that could
absolutely, yeah,
yep. In Australia specifically, because who you go to for explant matters, because you have to take the capsule out and things like that. I feel like I totally digressed, but I lost track, but explant matters.
No, that's
fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the mold for me was a big one because we kind of Googled this morning.
We did. It was actually shocking to see, like you said, Danielle, some of the implants were black.
Yeah.
It's just...
It's like mold.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
I'll send you mine. Mine were crystal clear and I still got sick and there were no leaks, whatever.
Wow.
So it's like, why? And then you mentioned, so it's a proprietary blend, what's in there. So I can't tell you what's in my Allergan Naturel, right?
Yeah.
Or my Mentor, blah, 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 or whatever, right?
Because it's secret squirrel business, you know? It's like a company secret. So, yeah, you never really know what is in those implants.
Right. And so I hate to admit this, but when I had explant, I thought, I'm getting pathology. I'll figure out what's in my implant, you know, what's in my, I don't even know what I thought at that point. Actually, I had so much brain fog, it was nuts. But I thought I would find out what was in my capsule and my tissues and things like that. And lo and behold, pathology tests for cells, like, you know, microbiology, cellular biology. It doesn't test for chemicals.
Yeah.
So it might tell me I have a granuloma, but it won't tell me why I have a granuloma. It might look like silicone. It might look like whatever. But so here we all are getting a capsulectomy or an en bloc, and we're all like, oh, look, we have no pathology. But if they don't do the right test, even for BIALCL, and they say it's negative, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You've got to test for the right things. So for those explanting and they want to know what's in it, it's a toxicology, it's a microbiology, and and it's pathology,
Absolutely.
Right? Or microscopy. And so we don't know what we don't know. So you also would then test the implant.
Yeah.
So you can see what's in what did get out. Or what got into the shell, because now there's there's been a couple of studies out of Brazil. Dr. Eduardo Flore, he's a MD PhD, he's a radiologist, an imaging specialist, and he he studied, I'd say, over 100 women, and they had symptoms, and he's like, let's take a look before, and he did MRI, and he looked at a breast sequencing imaging, and he uses different parameters than we do in the US. Like you wouldn't necessarily just see that. And he found something called silicone-induced granulomas by breast implants. And so it's a consistent correlation to you have symptoms, you have this sign. And so our next step is to say, okay, you have symptoms, this sign, what's in the catcher's mitt, which is the capsule, right?
Yeah.
And what floors me is you have these sponsored studies, but nobody's looking at the capsule. Nobody's looking at a healthy margin. Nobody's looking at the breast implant. I mean, nobody's looking outside the breast implant.
Yeah.
They're all looking to the human for their genetic factors of why they can't accept the breast implant.
So it must be a genetic fault for not being able to tolerate a chemical or a 40 plus chemicals in your body. There's obviously something wrong with your body if it can't tolerate it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll just exclude you from
Yeah.
getting implants versus making the implants safer or doing whatever they need to do, you know?
Yeah, it's just astonishing because I mean, especially in terms of because a lot of the symptoms of breast implant illness relates to inflammation and immune activation. So a lot of women get with autoimmune disorders and things like that, and that's because the silicon nanoparticles, like our macrophages, which is part of our immune system, gobbles up these silicon nanoparticles. And then that triggers this whole inflammatory response and can even kill the macrophages. So you can end up with a lot of immune dysregulation, either a suppressed immune system or overactive immune system with autoimmune disorders and things like that. So, and that's just, I mean, the list of biochemical consequences of we can talk for 3 hours about, and that's why the summit is such a great thing, because that's where people can go and listen to all of these all of this stuff that happens in your body from these implants.
Well, and Elizma, just from if something interrupts my methylation because it's too busy, or phase 1 or phase 2, or I'm still trying to figure that all out. I'm kind of kidding because you taught me well. But one of the things that was interesting is when I went into surgery, I asked them, please test my capsules for heavy metals. Not sure what happened. They tested my urine. When they tested, like they always test to make sure you're not pregnant or whatever before you go under.
Yeah.
My arsenic level came back sky high.
Wow.
I'm not a rice eater. I'm like low carb, high protein at that time, probably methyl depleted. We won't go there, but it was sky high. Like it was off the charts enough to, like be alarmed and be like, what are you doing? What are you eating? Who's trying to kill you, kind of.
Wow.
Like that's exactly what my plastic surgeon said. Like, who's trying to kill you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I said, okay, let's test it now. So it was like, I think it was a 2-week follow-up or a week follow-up after explant. And it was 0.
Wow.
Nothing changed in my diet except for the removal of the implants.
Wow.
So I don't think it was that the implants had that much arsenic in it. I think it's that it shuts down systems. And maybe some of that's epigenetic, right? But and there were other metals that were a little higher, but they weren't as high as arsenic. But that was literally a big I think aluminum and lead were a little high too.
Yeah.
But whether or not that's because, so this is where I think the community gets where I get a little wonky. Is, there's heavy metals in the implants, mercury, lead, arsenic, all of that, grains of sand. Like we won't even talk about the off-gassing or the bonding or all of that. Like there's a ton of things in there that can affect the body. And when it does, what is it affecting? We don't know. Is it just changing out? Is it changing your zinc, calcium, mineral ratios? Is it changing is it shutting down your methylation? Is it on overdrive? What is what?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it's not just the chemicals of, you can argue, the mercury levels are not that high or whatever levels are not that high in the implant. But if they shut down parts of your biochemistry, your detoxification pathways, then everything else gets amplified. Everything else that comes into your life gets amplified. Yeah. The can of tuna that you eat, that mercury that you would normally excrete in that can of tuna, your body's now holding on to it. So it's a cascading effect, right?
Yeah. So if you have 2 cans of tuna, I'm kind of trying to be a little lighter, right? But if you have breast implants, that is a load, regardless. It's a foreign object.
Yeah.
Like we should acknowledge that. Regardless of the chemicals, your body has to do something with something that is not of you. that's a load. So your body reacts, and you know how it reacts. Are you going to deplete your B1, your B6, your magnesium? What's the overdrive here? And then what gene expression is it going to take? And you know, we haven't looked at all that cascade, and we need to be able to help I think there's like, in the US, I think there's over 4 million women with breast implants.
Wow.
I think it's either 6 worldwide, or maybe, I want to say 16, but I honestly don't have the right numbers. But if you take 30% of that, that's your patient population.
Wow.
And if we keep just doing the things to feed the body, that's one thing. But I mean, in functional medicine and in the naturopath world, you take away the toxins, right?
Yeah.
Like remove. Isn't that like step 1?
Yeah.
Right? Get yourself out of the environment. But when the environment's in you, what do you do?
Yeah.
Whether it's a pacemaker, breast implants, dental implants. And for some women, removing is not an option, whether that's a financial or a
Psychological even.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be a big one.
or, you know, cultural or whatever it is, right? For me, I did it just for augmentation. I did it just to look good or think I look good. For women who have breast cancer, that trajectory, I can't even put myself in that realm, you know? And when you get diagnosed, you have, at least in the US, you have a track that you get diagnosed, your outcome is they want you to feel whole and complete. And part of me is like, God bless them for doing this, right? Like for giving you the package. But how do you make an informed choice at that time when you're just like, I got cancer?
Yeah.
I got to get through this. I've got to get through chemo or radiation or I don't even understand or can be with that trajectory.
Yeah.
But those women now, some, and it's not everybody, so I don't want to cause like a panic. It's not as rare as the numbers are showing because we haven't looked for it, right? But that BIA-LCL, the squamous cell, the melanoma, that's all within the capsule and the implant is significant for that one person, for those 3 or those 10 or those 30. And when we get sick, do we go to the plastic surgeon and say, Nicole, I think this was to your point. You don't go to the plastic surgeon. Why would you think it's your breast implants? You know? And this is not an easy choice to explant. You know, it is a personal choice. It is a informed choice. And I'm hoping that with the MRIs, if you can see this silicone-induced granuloma and you have symptoms, explant.
Yeah. And again, that's a good point. Like, you know, that was one of the things we wanted to kind of like clarify. Can a woman with breast implant illness get better without getting the implants removed? You know, can you just take supplements and do stuff without getting, because we get that asked a lot. I get that asked a lot by clients because there is a psychological aspect. A lot of women just don't want to get their implants removed for, you know, whatever their reasons are. But does that then limit their ability to recover?
Yes, and it's a choice. If you're how I interact with my clients is, let's do all the things, because it's a diagnosis of exclusion, right? So you do all the things. I did all the things, and I felt better. Absolutely felt better, but I still wasn't me. So I did what I did.
Yeah.
But if you're you at that point in time, right, then be you and don't explant. But no, if you can't get to where you want to be, explant with a capsule removal. And maybe the future is also capsule removal and have healthy margin. I'm not sure, but like it really is up to that person.
Yeah.
What's your level of vitality that you want?
Yeah.
It was not acceptable for me.
Yeah.
And so many things about that. But yeah, so I don't know that I think if you're okay with that level of vitality, then you don't have to explant.
Yeah.
But know that it is a toxic load. There is always, for everyone, a gel bleed.
Yeah.
What your body does with that gel bleed, your body does with that gel bleed.
It's a very, very good point. And we found some other interesting ways, like, in terms of...
alternatives to
alternatives.
There is a procedure coming out now. What is it called? Fat transfer breast
Fat
augmentation.
transfer.
Yeah, which is obviously much safer. It's your own tissue. It is still surgery, but obviously a much better option than the implants if that's where you want to go. But I think that's relatively new. We couldn't find too much on that.
It's actually pretty well sought out. That is what I had.
Yeah.
I joke, these are my thighs, but they are.
That's great. Take fat from another part of your body.
It's a brilliant idea.
That's great.
But let's talk lymphatics. Let's talk about fat cells. Let's talk about stem cells. We don't have to do it at all right now, but your lymphatics, right, are all part of your immune system in my world. When you rip out a part of those lymphatics, and you're looking for the juicy baby fat cells to transfer wherever you want to transfer them, face, breast, butt, wherever, you need a healthy environment to make those grow, in my opinion, and to nurture them like you would a baby, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going for an explant, and we don't know these numbers, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going for an explant, you're all inflamed, you're in chaos, right? Mentally, physically, all of that. And then you're going to take fat, aka rip fat from your thighs, and centrifuge it down to put it in your breasts. What's the likelihood, one, that's going to stay? Two, they don't tell you about fat necrosis. And three, they never talk about how that's going to affect your immune capacity, right?
Yeah.
For me, I waited 3 months and it knocked me on my butt. So March. And then I actually came to Australia for 3 weeks.
Yes.
Right post after that. And was still spinning and recovering from that. So it's a different kind of spin. It's still a surgery. Yes, it's, what do they call it? It's your same tissue, so you'll take it better. But what they didn't tell me, and there's different techniques out there that will give you more different, better results for fat transfer, but there's fat necrosis. And so that fat necrosis does some things, and that could actually be a mast cell trigger. And then you have mast cell mediated things like leaky gut and all of that. So, this quest of mine, of all of us, right? Like this, I'm not talking about like you. This was me running through these hoops to gain the glory or whatever that saying is. And, like, as long as women know the cost, like, I'm okay with your choice.
Yeah. It's an informed choice, right? It's not about... what women can or cannot do or should not do. It's just give them all the information so, they know the risks and, then they make the choices that they want to make.
Yeah. And it's tough to get the full informed out there. So yes, I've had fat transfer and I'm happy I did. And it took its toll. You know, I'm 3 years out, and I'm literally, I think since March, feeling like totally myself. And that was about 3 years out. October 31st, 3 years ago, was my explant.
Yeah.
So there's always a payoff and a cost. Just know what they are. You know, don't go in blindly. Even with explant, don't go in blindly. You know, find a practitioner to help guide you, or at least give you markers and milestones to see how you're doing after. There are women who explant that don't get better.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean don't explant, but there are things to do before
Yeah.
to help you through it. And if you're already triggered with an autoimmune, lupus, scleroderma, sarcoidosis, any of these, Graves, Hashimoto's,
Yeah.
you know, Crohn's, all of this, new or exacerbated or what have you, like it's going to be a different heal for you
Yeah.
than if you think you have something going on.
Yeah.
It's rough.
So there was a question that I wanted to ask, and I don't know if it's a bit of a loaded question, because I looked at some of the FDA hearings. You know, what some of the women said, you know, very emotional stuff, and I guess, you know, there was a lot of women who kind of said that they believe their children or their babies were affected because they had implants during pregnancy. So one of the things I guess I wanted to ask, because that's what women want to know, is it safe to breastfeed whilst I have implants? Now, there's obviously not that much research out on it, but what is your feel on that?
You're making my jaw clench. What I know is that the placenta transfers everything from the mom to the baby.
Yeah.
You know, I know when the baby is born, the breast gives the nourishment, and it does. It will give the nourishment, and it will give everything else that the mom has. Even if she didn't have breast implants, it's going to pass everything, toxic, untoxic. You know,
Yeah.
it just does. I also know that breast implants can cause different mineral deficiencies. Zinc being probably the most powerful shift, calcium maybe another. And when that shift happens, you're passing that shift on to the baby. What that does to each individual baby, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But if you look at how breast milk fortifies a child just by that, and you look at the toxin release of the mom, it's placenta, breast milk, urine, feces, sweat.
Yeah.
That's all I notice. That's all I know to say.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a very safe and also a very well-informed kind of an answer there. So no, that's really, really good. Now, you were testifying at the FDA in March 2019, I believe. Or was it 2000? Yeah, it was 2019, right?
Yeah, because we had another one before that meeting, but it was a private meeting. The 2019 was a public meeting.
Yeah.
Is that much?
And
Yeah.
so you were there testifying, and that was a very emotional experience as well. Because that was kind of like the first time the FDA in the US really acknowledged that there's something to see here, right?
I think publicly, I know when the silicone leak and ruptures, that was pretty actually public and versed. And I think they had a public meeting at that time. But that was the first since then, so 20 plus years since. Yeah, that was a challenging
I can
moment in
imagine.
time for myself.
So, from the breast implant illness summit, any other exciting stuff for you going forward, like in this space?
Well, for me, the two things that I love, well, we had over 30 speakers, 3 days, over 36 hours, right? So, and everyone volunteered their time to show up for this cause. So that alone was like so empowering to me. What came through from the summit is that actually the summit, if you listen to all the speakers, and if anyone with or without implants took on what they said, you would have, I think, a more vitality.
Yeah.
Is it all the vitality you want? I'm not sure, but there are precursors to, like, or at least assumptions that are more objective that we can make that breast implant illness is real. The FDA, them saying, hey, these symptoms correlate with breast implant illness is a big deal.
Yeah.
So now we're looking for the objective data. We have a hair test that tests for platinum that hopefully will be coming out soon. That's Dr. Deachcombe. And then we have the MRI that shows SIGBEC with Dr. Fleury in Brazil. So we're hope to test those in either real world experience or multi-center trials. So we're selling the on-demand summit platform to help raise money to do these clinical trials. So that to me is like fantastic, because one of the arguments is that how do you all these symptoms are just like these symptoms, and everyone wants to compare it to autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
Well, we're still trying to figure out what autoimmune disease really is.
That's right.
And we haven't even gotten into, like, when you look at a foreign body and we talk about T cells versus B cell activation and all of that, and you look at BIALCL T cell activation and all this, I'm going to drop it again, T cell activation, like, what does that mean? Like, is it all a precursor? And what do T cells activate against, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of the things is foreign bodies, infections, things like that. So why are we not looking at this cascade?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So all that, and then lymphatics and things like that. So there's a lot of great trails that I have gleaned from the summit, right? And what's coming after the summit, after a little bit of a rest, is a consensus document or a summary of the summit, because I don't think practitioners have a guideline of what to do. I'm looking for help with that.
Yes, now we'll have our little conversation soon.
Yeah. I think there needs to be some sort of, right, wrong, or indifferent. There needs to be a beginning book. There needs to be a beginning solid practitioner. Let's start taking a look at this, and move. Let's give a place for people to move and understand and research. So from the Breast Implant Health Summit point of view, the next step is a consensus document, a textbook of some sort. And then breaking down the summit. I mean, that was so broad. The one good thing that COVID brought was that it became an online event versus a 5, 10, 15 person event in Charlotte, North Carolina, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so now we have all these venues, but it also gave us I'm still trying to put it all together, but there's like common themes that each speaker touched on. And if the biggest common theme, I think, has to do with the lymphatics. So, and I don't even know specifically what to do with that, from fascia to spleen to T cells and B cells and all of that. So, so the summit brought a lot of thought, and we'll have to just see what's next.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a formula yet.
No, but that sounds very, very exciting. Any questions you wanted to add?
Well, no, I think we've gone through so much stuff. It's been really fascinating, and I think it's good to really start to bring this to light more, because there are so many women out there that are struggling with these mysterious, symptoms, and they don't know what's going on. And I think bringing to light that it could possibly be related back to their breast implants, and giving them the opportunity to then investigate that further is really important. So yeah, thanks so much, Danielle. It's been amazing, and I've learnt so much around it all. So definitely a topic that needs to have a lot more attention brought to it.
I think so. I can feel a podcast part 2 come on.
Yeah, we could go in so many different directions.
A little lighter.
No, this has been extremely informative.
Yeah.
And I think our listeners out there would learn a lot from this, both from an experience point of view as well as the technical aspect. So the Health Summit, remind us again where people can purchase the Health Summit.
Oh, yeah. breastimplанthealthsummit.com. And on Facebook, it's the same. Or BIHS on Instagram. I'm not a good marketer there. But what I would like to say, to anybody, whether it's a woman, transgender, anyone with any implantable device, especially breast implants, if you're doing all the things, if you're taking all the supplements, if you're taking all the gut rehab and you're doing the things, and you're just not getting it, or not getting better, or you want more, just ask yourself, what else could it be? And check into it and see if that's something you can do without. And there's a lot of groups out there that can help discuss, or you can, there's a lot of groups both ways that can have you gather evidence one way or the other. And what I'm hoping is on the very final pages of the summit website is resources. They're more academic resources than personal stories, just so people can see what has or has not been validated thus far.
Amazing. It's so good to see you again, Danielle. And I really want to thank you for your time and sharing a lot of this personal journey that you've been on for such a long time, with us and our listeners. Learned a lot. And thank you so much for your time,
amazing.
Danielle.
Thanks, Danielle.
It was great. We're definitely going to see you again. And thank you to our listeners. Hope you guys learned quite a bit. And, take the advice and go and watch the summit if you feel this is something that resonates with you.
Excellent. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Danielle.
Bye.
See you, Danielle.
Bye.
Bye-bye.